Lena had always been a quiet person. She wasn't the type who tried to stand out or chase attention. In a world where everyone wanted to be seen, she was content being unnoticed. But deep inside, she carried something that few people around her knew. A dream that never stopped whispering to her, even when she tried to ignore it. Since childhood, she had loved the sound of the piano. Whenever she heard it, even from an old movie or a passing tune from someone's window, something inside her came alive. It wasn't just music to her. It felt like a language her heart already understood. But dreams don't always fit easily into reality, especially when life keeps reminding you of what you don't have. Her family wasn't rich. They lived in a small rented house, and every rupee was counted carefully. Her parents worked hard, but there was never extra money for things like instruments or lessons. Lena never complained. She just told herself that maybe one day, if she worked hard enough, she could save up and learn. Years passed, and that one day never seemed to come. Life kept moving forward. She grew older, finished school, and got into college. But the love for music didn't fade. It was still there, sitting quietly inside her, waiting. One afternoon, while walking back from college, she passed by a small thrift shop. There were old clothes, books, lamps, and in one corner, something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a keyboard. Dusty, a few buttons missing, but still whole. The price tag made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible either. That night, she counted the money she had saved from small part-time jobs, helping in a bookstore, doing simple data entry, and tutoring kids in her neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The next day, she went back to that shop and bought the keyboard. It wasn't fancy. Some keys made odd sounds and a few didn't work at all. But to Lena, it was perfect. She set it up on an old wooden table in her room and sat in front of it like it was the most precious thing in the world. She didn't know how to play, not even the basics. But she had the internet and a lot of patience. She started with free tutorials, simple notes, and endless repetition. Every night after finishing her studies, she'd sit by that keyboard, wearing old headphones so no one could hear her mistakes. At first, the sound was messy, clumsy, full of errors. Her fingers didn't listen to her mind. But little by little, she improved. Every time she managed to play one small piece correctly, she'd smile to herself, a quiet victory no one else saw. Her roommate once walked in while she was practicing and laughed, not out of cruelty but surprise. "You actually think you can learn this by yourself?" she said jokingly. Lena smiled awkwardly and replied, "I'm just trying." But word spread quickly. Soon, people in her class started teasing her. "The pianist," they'd call her, laughing. Some asked her to play in front of them, pretending to be interested, only to laugh when she pressed a few wrong keys. It stung, of course, but Lena didn't fight back. She had learned early that not everyone will understand what you're trying to do, especially when you're still learning. So she stayed quiet and kept practicing. She made a habit of playing late at night when everyone else was asleep. The faint light from her study lamp would fall across the keyboard, and the rest of the world would disappear. Sometimes she'd close her eyes and imagine herself playing on a real stage, with an audience that actually listened. Her fingers grew faster. Her rhythm improved. What once sounded like random noise started to sound like actual music. She was proud of herself, even though no one else noticed. But learning alone wasn't easy. There were nights when she wanted to give up. Sometimes she'd spend hours trying to play a simple tune, and it just wouldn't come out right. Her frustration would build until tears filled her eyes. She'd stop, breathe, and whisper to herself, "It's okay, I'll get it tomorrow." And she always came back the next night. That was her secret strength. She never stopped showing up. Her classmates didn't know the amount of time she spent trying. They only saw what they wanted to see. An awkward girl with big dreams. Some even said behind her back, "She's wasting her time. She'll never make it." But something in Lena refused to believe them. Maybe it was stubbornness or maybe it was faith. She didn't want to prove them wrong. She just wanted to prove to herself that she could learn something beautiful, even without help. A few months later, something happened that she didn't expect. One of her professors was walking past the open classroom door after hours and heard the sound of a piano playing. He stopped, listened for a moment, and walked in. Lena froze mid-note. "Who taught you?" he asked. She panicked a little, thinking she might be in trouble for using the room after hours. "No one, sir. I just learned from videos." He looked surprised. "From videos? You have a good ear. You should perform at the college talent night next month." Her eyes widened. "Me? No, sir. I'm not good enough." He smiled. That's what everyone says before they surprise themselves. After he left, Lena sat in silence. The idea of performing in front of everyone terrified her. She imagined the laughter, the judgment, the same faces that used to mock her whispering again. But a small part of her felt proud that someone had noticed her effort, even for a second. That night she couldn't sleep. The thought of being on stage scared her, but another thought scared her more. What if she never tried? The next day, she looked at the registration list for the talent night. Her fingers hovered over the paper for a few minutes before she finally wrote her name down. Felt unreal. When her classmates saw it, the comments started again. "Seriously? You're performing? You'll freeze up there." Another said, "Can't wait to see this disaster." Lena just smiled. She had already made her choice. Over the next few weeks, she practiced even harder. She spent hours perfecting one simple song. Something soft, emotional, and full of meaning. It was the same melody she used to hum to herself on difficult days. Her family didn't even know she had signed up. She didn't want to tell them until it was over. She wanted to show them something real, not just another dream that people might laugh at. The night before the event, she sat by her window with the keyboard on her lap. She didn't play. She just looked at it quietly. The same broken, old keyboard that had taught her more about patience and courage than any classroom ever could. She thought about the nights she cried, the times people mocked her, and the hours she spent alone, learning something she wasn't sure she could master. And yet, she had made it this far. It wasn't about being perfect anymore. It was about finally sharing the piece of her heart that had been silent for too long. When she finally went to sleep that night, she didn't dream of applause or praise. She just dreamed of peace. The kind that comes from doing what you love, even when no one believes in you. The next evening, as she stood backstage waiting for her turn, she could already hear the murmurs and whispers from the audience. She knew some were still expecting her to fail. But she also knew something else: she had already won. Because while everyone else had laughed, she had worked. While they doubted, she practiced. And when she finally stepped onto that stage, the quiet beginner who once hid her music in the dark was ready to let the world hear what patience and persistence really sounded like. The day of the performance came faster than Lena expected. The college auditorium was buzzing with excitement. Banners hung on the walls, lights flickered over the stage, and groups of students chatted in every corner. For most people, it was just another talent night. But for her, it felt like the most important moment of her life. She stood backstage, clutching her fingers together, trying to calm the shaking in her hands. Her heart thumped so loudly she could almost hear it echo through her chest. Every time someone's name was called before hers, her stomach tightened a little more. The students performing before her seemed confident. Dancers, singers, even a comedy act. The audience laughed and cheered loudly, which only made Lena more nervous. She kept glancing at the keyboard that had been placed at the side of the stage, the same one she had borrowed from her professor for the event. She whispered to herself, "You've practiced this 100 times. You can do it." But her voice trembled. A few classmates walked by and gave her a quick smirk. "You're really doing this?" one of them said softly, half laughing. Another whispered to her friend, "This should be fun to watch." Lena looked down and didn't respond. She'd heard worse before. It still hurt, but she had learned how to let it pass through her without showing it. When her name was finally announced, her body went cold. She felt like her legs might not move, but somehow they did. She walked toward the stage slowly, her palms sweating, her breathing shallow. The bright lights hit her face, making it hard to see anyone in the crowd. But she could feel them, all those eyes waiting to see what she would do. She sat down at the keyboard. The hall went quiet, the kind of silence that could crush your confidence if you let it. She placed her fingers on the keys and froze for a second. For a brief moment, she thought of walking off the stage. But then, a small voice in her heart reminded her of all the nights she had practiced, the mistakes, the tears, the long hours when everyone else was asleep. She remembered the dream she had since childhood, the one that had survived through every laugh and every doubt. So she took a deep breath and began to play. The first few notes came out soft and shaky. Her hands trembled slightly, and she missed a key or two. She heard someone in the back laugh quietly, and it almost broke her focus. But then she closed her eyes and let the music take over. It was the same piece she had practiced for weeks. A tune she had written herself, something simple but full of emotion. It told a story without words, a story of trying, failing, and getting back up again. As she played, something shifted in the room. The audience grew silent. The laughter stopped. Her fingers moved more smoothly now, each note flowing into the next. Her fear started to fade, replaced by something stronger, peace. Every sound that came from the piano carried a part of her journey. The pain of being doubted, the loneliness of practicing alone, the small victories no one saw. She poured everything she had into the music. By the time she reached the last part of the piece, her whole body was trembling again, but this time from emotion, not fear. The final note lingered in the air for a long moment before fading into silence. Then, nothing. Absolute stillness. Lena kept her eyes down, afraid to look up. But slowly, the silence broke into clapping, soft at first, then louder until it filled the room. The applause grew so strong that she finally looked up and saw people standing. Some were smiling, some even wiping their eyes. It didn't feel real. She stood up from the piano, her heart still racing, her fingers trembling. She gave a small, nervous smile and a shy bow before walking off the stage. The lights behind her dimmed as the host announced the next act, but Lena barely heard it. Her mind was still stuck in the sound of that applause. Backstage, a few students came up to her. Some who had laughed before now looked speechless. One girl said softly, "That was actually beautiful." Another nodded and smiled awkwardly. "Did you really learn that by yourself?" Lena nodded, her voice quiet. "Yes." Later that night, when the event ended and the crowd began to leave, her professor found her near the exit. "You played beautifully," he said with a proud smile. "That came from the heart. Remember that feeling. You'll need it one day." Lena thanked him politely, though she barely knew what to say. She was still trying to process what had just happened. When she got home that night, she didn't celebrate or post anything online. She didn't need to. She just sat on her bed, staring at her old keyboard, and smiled. That same broken keyboard that had started it all. For the first time, she felt proud not because others liked her music, but because she had faced her fear and didn't run away. That, to her, was the real victory. The next morning, she walked into college expecting things to feel the same as before. But something had changed. People greeted her differently. Some smiled. Some even asked when she was going to perform again. Of course, not everyone was kind. A few still made sarcastic comments, pretending her performance wasn't a big deal. "She just got lucky," one said. Another muttered, "Anyone can learn a few keys." But it didn't bother her as much anymore. She had realized something during that performance. No amount of praise or criticism could define her worth. Only the effort she put in truly mattered. A few days later, the college uploaded a video of the talent night on their social media page. Within hours, her performance started getting attention. People left comments saying how touched they were by the emotion in her playing. Some asked for the full version of her song. Lena read the comments quietly, smiling to herself. It wasn't fame she was after, it was connection. And now, through her music, she was finally connecting with others in a way words never could. Her roommate, who had once teased her, watched the video and said, "I didn't know you were that good. I guess I was wrong." Lena didn't say, "I told you so." She just smiled and said, "Thanks." But behind that small smile was a mix of relief and pride. For months, she had fought against self-doubt, loneliness, and other people's laughter. And now, her effort had finally spoken for itself. That weekend, she went back to the thrift shop where she had bought her old keyboard. The shop owner recognized her and said, "You're the girl who bought that broken piano, right?" Lena laughed softly. "Yes, it still works, though not perfectly." He smiled. "Sometimes things don't have to be perfect to make something beautiful." His words stayed with her long after she left the shop. That night, she played the same song again in her room, the same one she had performed on stage. But this time it sounded different. It sounded confident, alive. She realized then that it wasn't just about playing the piano anymore. It was about learning to believe in herself, even when no one else did. She thought of all the people who had mocked her, and instead of anger, she felt gratitude. If they hadn't doubted her, she might never have pushed herself this far. As she finished her song, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is just the beginning." And in that quiet room, under the dim glow of her lamp, the girl who once hid her music from the world had finally learned how to let it be heard. The night after the college performance, Lena could barely sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of applause echoing in her mind. It wasn't just the clapping, it was the feeling behind it. For once in her life, people had listened to her without laughing. They had seen her, really seen her. The next morning, she woke up early. The sunlight peeked through her curtain, painting a soft glow across her small room. Her old keyboard sat quietly on the table, almost like it was smiling at her. She ran her fingers gently over the worn-out keys and whispered, "We did it." That small whisper carried so much emotion. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was relief that all her effort had meant something. As days passed, her video continued to spread online. People she didn't even know were sharing it, calling her performance honest, emotional, and pure. The comments were kind, full of support and encouragement. Some even said her story reminded them to chase their own dreams. It was strange in a good way. For someone who used to be invisible, this sudden attention felt almost unreal. Still, Lena tried to stay grounded. She went to her classes as usual, helped her friends when they asked for notes, and spent her evenings practicing quietly. She didn't want to get lost in the excitement. Deep down, she knew that real success wasn't about one performance. It was about what came after. One afternoon, her professor called her to his office. When she walked in, he smiled warmly and said, "You've become quite the inspiration lately. I've received emails from other schools asking about you. There's a community event next week. They'd love to have you perform." Lena's eyes widened. "Me? Really?" "Yes," he said with a nod. "They saw your video. They think your story might encourage others." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Just the idea of performing again in front of strangers made her heart race. But something inside her wanted to do it. Not to prove anything, but to share the feeling she had experienced that night. So she agreed. The following week, she found herself standing behind the stage curtain of a local auditorium. The hall was larger than her college's, and the crowd was much bigger. Families, children, and even a few local reporters. She could hear their chatter from where she stood. Her name was printed on the event poster outside, under the title "The Girl Who Played from the Heart." The phrase made her both proud and nervous. She wasn't used to being called things like that. As the lights dimmed and her turn approached, the same old nerves returned. Her palms grew sweaty, her breath became shallow, and her thoughts started spinning. "What if I make a mistake? What if they expect too much?" she whispered to herself. But then she remembered the night of her first performance. The fear had been there too, but so had courage. The kind of courage that comes from love, not from pride. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped forward as her name was called. The applause that greeted her was soft but welcoming. She walked across the stage, the light blinding her once again, and sat down at the piano. It wasn't her old keyboard this time. It was a real grand piano. The smooth, polished surface reflected the stage lights like water. She placed her fingers on the keys, her heart pounding like a drum. For a few seconds, she didn't play. She just listened, to the silence, to her heartbeat, to the sound of people waiting. Then she began. The melody she played that evening was new. It was something she had written recently, inspired by her journey. Started gentle and slow, almost like a whisper. Then it grew stronger, each note flowing into the next, telling a story of struggle, doubt, and hope. As she played, memories rushed through her mind. Nights of practice, moments of sadness, and the laughter of those who once mocked her. But those memories didn't hurt anymore. They became part of the music. Halfway through the song, something unexpected happened. A small mistake. One of her fingers slipped and hit the wrong note. The sound broke the smooth rhythm for a second, and panic flashed across her mind. Her first instinct was to stop, to apologize, to hide. But she didn't. She kept going, her hands moving gently back into the flow of the song. No one in the audience seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, but they didn't care. Because the emotion in her playing was stronger than any mistake. By the time she reached the last note, the entire hall was silent again, just like before. Then, the same sound she had dreamed of hearing filled the space. Applause. This time, it was louder, warmer, full of heart. She smiled, stood up, and bowed. It wasn't a nervous bow like the first time. It was calm and grateful. After the performance, several people came to talk to her. A mother told her that her daughter wanted to learn piano after hearing her play. An older man said her song reminded him of his late wife. A young student said, "You made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time." Lena listened to each of them quietly, her heart full. She realized something that night. It wasn't about how perfectly she played. It was about how honestly she played. People didn't connect with perfection. They connected with truth. Later, as she walked home under the streetlights, her phone buzzed with new messages. More appreciation, more invitations. But one message caught her eye. It was from a girl she barely knew from her college. The message said, "I used to laugh when you practiced. I'm sorry. You showed us all what real passion looks like." Lena read the message twice, her eyes softening. She didn't reply right away. She just smiled and whispered, "Thank you." The next few days were a blur of excitement. Her story was spreading quickly, not because she had some great technique or fame, but because people were drawn to her honesty. However, with the new attention came new pressure. She started receiving requests from different organizations and events. Some even asked her to perform songs she didn't know or to collaborate with other musicians. It was overwhelming. One night, she sat in her room staring at her old keyboard again. The keys were worn out from all the practice. It reminded her of where she had started. A small thought crept into her mind. What if she couldn't keep up with everyone's expectations? She closed her eyes and rested her hands on the keys. The same feeling returned. The fear, the excitement, the uncertainty. And then she smiled. She whispered, "I started this alone, and I'll keep going the same way, one note at a time." Over the next few weeks, she kept performing, not for fame, not for applause, but for the joy it gave her. Each time she sat at the piano, she played as if it were her first time all over again, with heart, with honesty, and with gratitude. And every time she played, something magical happened. People stopped talking, stopped scrolling, stopped rushing. They listened, because in her music they could feel something real. She didn't realize it yet, but those moments were changing her life forever. What started as a dream in a quiet room had become something much larger. A reminder that sometimes, courage speaks loudest in silence. That night, before sleeping, she recorded a short message for herself on her phone. Her voice was soft and steady as she said, "Don't forget where you started. Don't forget why you began." Then she placed her phone aside, turned off the light, and let the sound of her own music carry her into sleep. The girl who was once mocked had now become someone others looked up to. But she knew deep down, this was just the beginning. After the community performance, Lena's life slowly began to change in quiet but meaningful ways. Her days were still simple, but there was something different about them now. When she walked through the college halls, people smiled at her. Even those who had once made jokes behind her back now looked at her with a kind of respect. Her music video online kept gaining attention. People were sharing it, writing things like, a self-taught girl with a heart full of honesty. At first, she didn't even know how to feel about it. It was strange to see her name spreading around, not because of gossip or rumors, but because of something she had worked for in silence. Still, Lena didn't let it get to her head. She told herself every morning, stay the same, stay humble. She knew fame could be tricky, could make people forget why they started. She didn't want that to happen to her. But life, as always, had its own plans. One afternoon, while she was sitting in the music room practicing, her professor entered with an excited look. You've been invited to a local television show, he said. They want to feature young artists who've inspired people. You'd be perfect for it. Lena's eyes widened. A TV show? Me? He nodded with a smile. Yes, and they'll even have a short interview segment. Don't worry. It's all positive. It's about passion and hard work. She hesitated. The thought of being on television made her nervous. But then she remembered all the people who had supported her, the ones who said her story gave them hope. Maybe, she thought, sharing it could help more people. So she agreed. The following week, she found herself sitting in a bright studio with cameras, lights, and people rushing around. Everything felt so unfamiliar. She wore a simple outfit, nothing fancy, just something that made her comfortable. When it was her turn, the host smiled and said, "Welcome, Lena. Your story has inspired thousands. Tell us, how did you learn to play the piano without any formal training?" Lena smiled softly. "I just practiced every night. I watched videos, made mistakes, and learned from them. I didn't have much, but I had time and I used it." The host nodded, impressed. "That's remarkable. So no teacher at all?" "No," she said honestly. "I couldn't afford lessons. But I had a keyboard I bought secondhand, and I tried to make the best out of it." The interview went smoothly. The host complimented her humility, and the segment ended with her playing a short piece on the piano. The audience clapped warmly, and the producers thanked her afterward. Lena left the studio that day feeling proud. She thought it was just a small local feature, something nice to remember. But when the episode aired a few days later, it spread faster than she expected. People online began talking about her honesty and her story of persistence. However, not everyone saw it the same way. A few local musicians began leaving comments online, questioning her abilities. Some said things like, "Anyone can play simple notes." Others accused her of exaggerating her story, claiming that no one could play that well without professional help. At first, Lena ignored it. She told herself it was normal. Success often attracts criticism. But as the comments grew, it started to hurt. One day, she opened her phone and saw a long post from a well-known music teacher in her city. It said, "We should stop glorifying untrained players. Art takes years of discipline, not just online tutorials." Hundreds of people had liked the post, and many agreed in the comments. Even though her name wasn't mentioned directly, Lena knew it was about her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the things they said. Maybe they were right. Maybe she wasn't a real musician. Maybe all she had was luck and timing. The next morning, she sat in front of her keyboard, staring at it for a long time. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but she couldn't play. The same notes that once brought her peace now felt heavy. Her friend called and asked, "Are you okay? You haven't posted anything lately." Lena forced a small laugh. "Yeah, just tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was afraid. Afraid that her honesty had backfired. Afraid that maybe she had shared too much. Still, deep inside, she knew she couldn't let negativity define her. So, she decided to face it in her own quiet way. That evening, she recorded a small video message and posted it online. Her voice was calm but firm. "I've seen a lot of comments about how I learned music. I just want to say I never claimed to be perfect or trained. I only shared my story because I wanted people to know that you can start from anywhere. I believe music isn't just about skill. It's about emotion. I respect every trained artist, and I'm still learning every day. But I'll never apologize for being honest about where I come from." Her video spread quickly. Thousands of people commented in support, thanking her for speaking up. Others said her words gave them courage to chase their own dreams, even if they didn't have perfect conditions. But not everyone was kind. Some critics called her overdramatic. Others accused her of using her background for attention. It was exhausting. There were days she thought about quitting social media altogether. But every time she felt like giving up, she'd get a message from someone saying, "Your story helped me believe in myself." That was enough to keep her going. One afternoon, her professor noticed her looking tired and asked gently, "Are you okay?" Lena sighed. "I just didn't expect people to be so harsh. I was only being honest." He nodded thoughtfully. "Honesty has a cost, Lena. Not everyone is ready to hear the truth. But don't let that stop you from being who you are. Remember, you didn't start this to please everyone. You started because you love the music." Those words stayed with her. The cost of honesty. It made sense now. She realized that telling the truth about her journey might make some people uncomfortable. But she also knew that lying or pretending would hurt her even more. So she kept playing even on the hard days. A month later, she received an invitation to perform at a cultural festival. It was a big event with musicians from across the city. At first, she hesitated. She knew some of the critics would be there. But then she remembered her professor's words, and her own reason for starting. She said yes. The night of the festival, as she walked onto the stage, she could see familiar faces in the crowd. Some looked curious, some skeptical. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath and began to play. Her song that night wasn't fancy or complex. It was gentle and real, just like her journey. Each note carried honesty, pain, and hope. By the end, the hall was quiet again, just like the first time she had ever played before an audience. And when the applause came, it wasn't loud or wild. It was sincere, the kind that comes from people who truly understand. After the performance, a young boy approached her. He couldn't have been more than 10. He said softly, "I want to play like you one day." Lena smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You will. Just don't stop trying." When she walked home that night, she realized that not every heart would understand her story, and that was okay. Because somewhere out there, someone needed to hear it. The cost of honesty was heavy at times. It meant being misunderstood, judged, even criticized. But the value of staying true to herself was far greater than all of that. She went to sleep that night with peace in her heart. Not because the world had accepted her, but because she had accepted herself. And that, she thought, was the real music all along. Months passed since the festival night, yet the memory of that performance stayed fresh in Lena's heart. It was the moment she truly understood what it meant to stand firm in her truth, even when the world didn't fully understand her. She had walked off that stage with her head high, not because of applause or recognition, but because she finally felt free. Her days returned to a quiet rhythm after that. She still attended her classes, helped out at home, and practiced the piano whenever she could. The excitement around her viral video had slowed down, which honestly gave her peace. But even though things had settled, something inside her had changed forever. She had grown. Her playing was different now, softer, deeper. Every note carried a sense of calmness that came from experience. Her fingers moved with confidence, not from ego, but from trust in herself. People who listened could feel it too. It wasn't about impressing anymore. It was about expressing. One afternoon, as she practiced alone in the music room, her professor walked in again. He leaned against the doorway, smiling quietly as he listened to her play. When she finished, he said, "You've found your sound." She looked at him, a little puzzled. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "Before, you were trying to sound like someone else, maybe like the pianists you watched online. But now, when you play, it's all you. That's what makes music beautiful." His words warmed her heart. She hadn't even realized it, but he was right. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped trying to prove herself. She had simply started to play from within. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at her college addressed to her. The handwriting was neat, and the seal looked official. Curious, she opened it carefully. It was an invitation from a well-known music academy in another city. They had seen her performance online and wanted to offer her a scholarship for a training program. Lena stared at the letter in disbelief. She read it over and over again to make sure she wasn't dreaming. When she told her professor, he smiled proudly. You see, the world has a way of finding those who stay true to themselves. She was thrilled, but also nervous. The idea of moving away, meeting new people, and starting in a professional environment scared her. She had always been the quiet girl who practiced alone in her room. Now she was being asked to step into a world full of experts. That night, she sat on her bed with the letter in her hands. Her mind was full of doubts. What if I'm not good enough? What if they find out I'm not trained like them? But then she thought about everything she had already overcome. The mocking, the judgment, the fear. She had faced them all and still kept going. This was just another step, one that could help her grow even more. So she said yes. Her family supported her decision with love and pride. Her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "You've always had music inside you. Go show the world." When the day came to leave, Lena packed her few belongings, including her old keyboard. It was scratched and faded now, but it was the reason she had come this far. She couldn't imagine being without it. The new city was busier and louder than she had imagined. The academy was huge, filled with students who had trained for years. They spoke confidently about composers, techniques, and theories she had never even heard of. For the first few days, she felt completely lost. During one of her first classes, the instructor asked everyone to play a short piece of their choice. When it was her turn, she hesitated. The other students had played complex classical pieces. She felt out of place, but she knew she had to be honest. She sat down and played one of her own compositions, a simple tune she had written long ago, one that told the story of her small town and her quiet nights of practice. When she finished, the room was silent. Then the instructor smiled and said, "You may not know all the theory yet, but what you have is rare emotion. Technique can be learned. Heart cannot." Those words gave her strength. From that day on, Lena worked even harder. She learned new techniques, studied music theory late into the night, and practiced until her fingers ached. But she never lost her natural touch. She didn't want to become just another pianist who played perfectly but without soul. Months turned into a year, and her confidence grew. She started performing in small academy concerts, and each time, she received more admiration. People were drawn not just to her playing, but to her sincerity. One evening, as she was packing up after a rehearsal, the academy director approached her. "We're planning a city-wide event," he said. "It's called Voices of the New Generation. We want you to represent the academy." Lena was stunned. "Me? But there are so many better players here." He smiled gently. "There are skilled players, yes, but few have stories that reach people's hearts. Yours does." She accepted, though with trembling hands. The thought of performing on such a big stage in front of hundreds of people made her nervous. But deep down, she knew this was her moment. The moment all those years of silent practice had been preparing her for. The night of the event arrived. The stage lights were blinding, and the crowd was much larger than anything she'd ever seen. Her heart pounded, and for a moment, fear crept back in. But then she thought of her journey, the laughter she once faced, the critics who doubted her, and the few kind souls who believed in her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. As she began to play, the world around her disappeared. Every note carried a piece of her story. The quiet beginnings, the struggles, the small victories, and the courage to stay honest. Her fingers moved gracefully, not from memorization, but from memory. When she finished, there was silence for a heartbeat. Then the applause began, soft at first, then louder, rising like a wave that filled the entire hall. People stood on their feet, cheering. She looked up and smiled, not out of pride, but gratitude. After the show, people came up to her, some even with tears in their eyes. They said her music made them feel something real, something pure. One elderly man told her, "You reminded me why I loved music in the first place." In that moment, Lena understood something she had never realized before. Success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about touching hearts, about making people feel seen and understood. The next morning, when she checked her messages, she saw hundreds of new ones from people across the country. Students, artists, and even teachers, thanking her for sharing her story. Among them was a short message from someone unexpected. It was from one of the same critics who had once mocked her online. It said, "I was wrong. Your music speaks louder than any argument ever could." Lena smiled quietly. She didn't reply with anger or pride. She just wrote back, "Thank you." Her honesty had once cost her peace, but now it had brought her something far greater. Respect, not for her fame, but for her truth. As the months passed, she continued to perform, teach, and share her journey. She didn't chase fame or money. She simply followed her love for music. Her life became full, not perfect, but meaningful. Sometimes she still visited her old town. She'd walk past her small school, sit by the lake where she used to dream, and smile. People there no longer whispered behind her back. They greeted her warmly, proud of the girl who never gave up. And every time she saw a young student struggling or doubting themselves, she told them, "Don't hide who you are. Be honest about your journey. Even if people don't understand it now, one day they will." Her story became a quiet reminder that honesty might come with pain, but it also brings freedom. And freedom, once earned, is worth every scar. As she sat by her piano one evening, the sunset pouring golden light into the room, she closed her eyes and played softly. The melody flowed like a memory, gentle, truthful, and alive. She didn't need applause anymore. She didn't need validation. All she needed was that sound, the music of her own heart. Because after everything, she finally understood. They mocked her once, but it was her honesty that made her unforgettable. And that was her true victory.